Okay.
I'm pulling that one in mind. I can only see so far. When I do it out, I tend to go backwards and forward and mess it up.
The young lady didn't want to take that last word.
George, you want to hold up your sandals? Somebody needs to introduce. Are you going to introduce Bob? You are. Okay. John, the floor is yours. Let's wait until everybody gets back in. Trust me, if you don't start talking, you'll be waiting for it. Oh, hold up.
Not me. Yes. No! Yes, my God! That's not me!
Well, I'm here, and tonight our speaker is Bob Nilsson. But before he starts the show, Bob, I need $20.
Yeah, I'm right here. All right, there we are.
Bob is our latest member of the Corral. I promise I'll give this to Debbie. And tonight Bob is going to speak about the trains of Cochise County. And as you'll see, this is quite an adventure. Thanks, John.
I've always been very interested in trains, and I've done this talk before, and I want to make sure I keep it to 45 minutes. So he's going to be.
No.
Okay. Could be 3 hours. Okay. Well, I'm going to start it out with. Back in 1863, Abraham Lincoln did the Federal Railroad Act of 1863 so that they could connect the West Coast with the East Coast. They used to have to send things down to San Francisco. They'd have to send it either around the Cape, or they would have to go to Panama and take a stagecoach across to the west side where they would steam up to San Francisco. And so the first railroad to do that, the Central Pacific, as you can see, that was the May 10th, 1869. They just had the 150th anniversary of the Union Pacific did. So as you can see here, the first railroads, this is all the railroads, and if anybody needs the map, I think John will pass one out to you. And these were all the railroads, and down here it says what railroad they were and when they were operating. So, okay, now the first railroad was the Southern Pacific, and it came out of California, arrived at Fort Yuma in May of 1877, and then it got to Tucson. It got to Tucson in March 20th of 1880, and when Benson was founded, June 22nd, 1880. And this is the depot in Benson. So, here's the little piece. Okay, and it was named for Judge William Benson. He was a friend of George Crocker. He was a judge in San Francisco, and he was also a prospector all over the West. So, okay. Now, this is another view of the depot. Now, this building right here was the Wells Fargo office, and it was built in 1886. So that's where they developed the freight, and there's the depot itself. Let's see. Okay. And as you can see, this is a map from Myrick's book. And if anyone want to know about railroad, David Myrick's book is fantastic. But this is one of the maps in it. And you can see this is the depot was right about here. This was for cattle, and the coal bin was here. But there was a turntable, and if you go down to about where the flagpole is in Benson, where that turn is where it goes under Highway 86, there was a 40-foot turntable, and that's what they used to turn the locomotives around on. So, now, also there was other stations that were in between Benson and all the way into actually Texas. This is the Mescal station. It was about 7 to 10 miles west of Benson. And this is Sybil, which was about 5 miles east of Benson. And none of these exist anymore. There's probably foundations out there, but this is where they got their train owners. They would, so they know what trains were coming. Now, this is the Dragoon station, and it also served as the Dragoon and Northern Railroad station that went in much later. Now, the second railroad that went in, the Santa Fe, was the New Mexico-Arizona line, and Southern Pacific was having a real kind of battle with the Santa Fe, and George Crocker actually met with T. Jefferson Coolidge of the Santa Fe. He says, "Hey, we're going to put each other out of business, trying to put railroads beside each other." He goes, "Why don't we make an agreement, and you can use the Southern Pacific tracks all the way to Benson, and you can put your railroad south, which was the New Mexico-Arizona line. It went down to Fairbanks first, and then it went west to Calabasas, Harshaw, Nogales, and then it eventually went to the Mexican Railroad that went to Guaymas, all points south of Mexico. So, okay, now this station was in Benson. They called it the East Station, and that's where the Santa Fe actually set up a yard there. And if you turn on Highway 80 to go south, and you know where Heberry, the assisted living facility is, this was right across the street from where it was, in west, or it faced the east. And that is the roundhouse that Santa Fe built. Southern Pacific had one also. And what happened, there was a big argument between the Arizona Southeastern and the Santa Fe, and after the argument was over, they decided to pull out. So in 1898, they traded the New Mexico-Arizona line for one in Blythe, California. And they moved that depot that you saw, that two-story depot, and this roundhouse got moved to Nogales. So, and that is actually one of the New Mexico-Arizona trains. And you can see the stack on it. That's it keeps the sparks from flying out. I think they call it spark arrestor. There's the shape right there. That's how you can tell the old ones. Okay. Now, the third railroad that formed was the Arizona Southeastern that I was talking for. It went from Fairbank to Bisbee in 1888-89, and it was this track. Now, this right here is the Arizona-New Mexico line that went in 1881-82. And that depot was right there, and then they had some corrals here. And you folks can hear me okay, attention. I keep pulling away from the mic, I'm not sure. But anyway, the New Mexico-Arizona line, it went down from Benson to Fairbank, all through the Sonoy and south. And this was the depot that was in Fairbank. I think they tore it down about 1970. And this trestle was put in 1888, and you could buy these trestles modular style. You can see the wrought iron up here. This still exists today, and the people have taken the track off and they drive their cars across it. So it's still being used.
Do you know who designed it, Bob?
No.
iPhone.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, I like the style. Now, you can see in Fairbank where the line went west, and you can see where the New Mexico-Arizona line went, and then the Arizona Southeastern met here, which later became the El Paso Southwestern in 1901. Yeah, and see the Arizona Southeastern, the Bisbee people, they were running mules over Mule Pass with the ore wagons, with 20 mule teams. And it was expensive, and it took a while, it was laborsome, and so Dodge decided we need to put a railroad in. So they went from Bisbee over to Lewis Springs, and then north to Fairbank. And what's really amazing about this is this postcard is probably 1900, 1903. And here's the depot in Benson. This train, they called it the El Paso Southwestern #1. And what's amazing about that is when they put the railroad in from Bisbee to Fairbank, they bought a bunch of used equipment, and they bought this for $12,000. And it's an 1857 Breeze and Leland wood burner. It is still in existence. It's in El Paso. They restored it in 2002, I believe it was. And you can see it. It's got a different stack on it. That's an oil burning stack on there. But what's also funny, they used it in a movie with Nelson Eddy in 1939 called That Freedom Ring, and I was able to capture the screen. There it is in the movie. See, they've got a smart arresting, and there you see the #1. And it was the Arizona Southeastern, but when it became the El Paso Southwestern, they called it the El Paso Southwestern #1. Okay, so after the Arizona Southeastern, after 1901, let me check my notes here, I want to make sure. I know there's a lot of people out there that know a lot more than me about railroad, and I can get corrected once in a while. So, let's see. Yeah, it was started in 1901, and in 1913, they ran a line from Mescal back behind where Cochise College is, down the east side, because it was less of a grade, to Fairbank. And then they also ran a line to Fort Huachuca. And then it went here first, followed the old Arizona Southeastern, then they moved it down to Hereford along the border. And it went to Douglas, and then from Douglas it went up to the east side of the Chiricahuas, and you can still see it today. Highway 80 follows. So, okay, yeah, you can see this is the Bisbee. You can see a little closer. See the dotted line, that's where the Arizona Southeastern was at one time, and you can see where they moved it. And another thing that's really interesting, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, this was the Colorado, Arizona, Colorado, it was the Southern Pacific. They were going to grade all the way down to Naco. And I'll get into that after. Go ahead. Now, this one, the Tombstone is Southern. What happened in 1903, they decided to put in the railroad finally to Tombstone. And the El Paso Southwestern went in here, and then in 1904, the Tombstone and Southern, it was financed by the mines. And you can see where it went into Tombstone, the El Paso Southwestern. And then here, the red, that was the Tombstone and Northern. And they didn't use it long. And this is the day that Tombstone, the train arrived in Tombstone. And there's the depot, which is, I believe, the library now. There's the train that came in. And what they did, they took this Sandy Bog stage lines, had this, they called it the Modoc stage. And it was bought from Modoc County, California back in, 1870 something. And they were using it to go from Benson to Tombstone and to Bisbee. And this was the last time that was used. And so they got a whole bunch of people got on to get their picture to say, hey, and that was the last time they were using stagecoaches in Tombstone. So, okay, and the Arizona, Colorado, this is what I was telling you before. This line here, there was a guy named Merriman. Yeah, he was E.H. Harriman. And he ran south from Cochise. And about the same time, he decided he was going to go all the way down to the border. So they actually ran the track all the way down to almost double Adobe, but no trains ever ran it. And Harriman died in 1909, and the guy that took over his position in Southern Pacific wasn't quite the gambler that he was. And so it just stopped. But what's amazing is it was still graded. And you can see today, it looks like dirt roads that was graded in 1909 to run the railroad down to Naco. Now, the Mexico and Colorado, it came up from Douglas. And it was actually put in by the El Paso and Southwestern. And they had a lot of trouble. They crossed over each other's tracks, and I know that there was a lot of bad blood between them. And one of the things that happened was, I don't remember which railroad it was, but they were doing some blasting. They used a little bit too much dynamite. They blew a giant rock up in the air and landed on one of the opposing team's tents. Thank God nobody was in it. So, yes.
How do you take
rail out there. As far as I can remember, there's nothing out there.
The rail, they took it up in the 20s.
But why did they dig out there first?
Oh, because there was mining in the area. There was Gleason, Cortland, Pierce. They found a big gold strike in 1898 in Pierce. And what's really funny, these guys, they would fund these railroads to these places. And the minute they got the railroads in, the price of copper would go down. And it made it no longer equitable to use the railroads. And there was a lot of that went on. And I think I'm going a little faster than I was thinking I was going to go. So the next one that I want to put on there, that's the Arizona Colorado. You can see it on here where they crossed. And there's Gleason, and there's Cortland, and there's Pierce. There's the Commonwealth Mill in Pierce, which was on the side of the hill. So there was a lot of mining going on in those areas at that time. And that's just one of them. And they were rebuilt several times. Now there's the Pierce Depot. So Southern Pacific actually built that depot in Pierce. It's long gone. There is some neat buildings out there. It's a really good day trip if you guys are looking for something to do. You can actually drive up in that area and you can see the old track plant, even though that the rails and the ties are gone. They used a lot of slag from the smelters for ballast for the rail. So, yeah, here's a little close-up of Cortland and Gleason. You can see where the lines came in, and that was one over the Cortland there. So. Now, another one that went in, this one went in about 1970, the purple. That is actually takes coal cars to the power plant. So I had to put that in there. But this is another interesting one. The Johnson Dragoon in Northern. It was formed in 1907 by a guy named Jay Pigeon and Steve Roman. I don't know if any of you have heard of Steve Roman. Yeah, he was a banker. He was an investor. He is one of the people that got the industrial school put into Benson. And he came from Kentucky in 1895. He was the Wells Fargo agent in Tucson, and then they moved him to Benson. And so he was involved with banks and all kinds of make money schemes, I guess you could call it. And he and this guy, they decided they were going to put in the Michigan Development Company, which was in the Dragoon, which is Johnson Mine now. And they had financial problems. Beginning on August 15, 1908, they bought 10 miles of track and 44 tons of angle bars for $24,000. And the idea was there was no down payment. The first year they paid 6% interest to Southern Pacific on it. The second year they paid 7% interest on it. And the third year they paid 8% interest on it. And they never made one payment on it. So, not, like I say, he must not have been a very good businessman. And the non-payment, it got auctioned off on the steps of the Cochise County Courthouse that November 11, 1911. And the person that bought it was Southern Pacific Railroad, who had loaned them the $24,000, and Southern Pacific paid $23,000 for it. Go figure. And they finally abandoned the line May 23rd, 1925. So a lot of the railroads that were in the area, they were hooked to the mining claims for supplies and things, and prices fluctuated. Like one of the things was they needed copper for World War I, and for the bullets and the brass and stuff. And they ramped up, put all this money into it, and the war is over, the price of copper would drop, and, they lose lots of money on it. So, okay, that's a picture of Dragoon in the mine about probably 1915, 1920. And there was quite a town there. There was a pool hall, and there was a school, and stores, grocery stores, lots of business there. They're pretty much self-contained. Like now we jump in our car and we drive 50 miles to find something. Back then you didn't have that luxury. So now, how am I doing on time?
You're doing fine.
Yeah, because I think I'm going through this. Yeah, but I'm close to the end now. So. Okay. And that was a stock certificate from the Dragoon and Northern Railroad for $100. Probably not worth the paper it was printed. Okay, now this last one here, this is real interesting. This was the Mascot and Western Railroad, and it was actually put in by a guy named Thomas McCauley, and he was quite the salesman. He could probably sell ice to the Eskimos. He was just really, kind of a little shady. But in 1930, before the railroad came in, he hauled 763 tons of copper ore in a Pierce Arrow truck. Yes. And he figured out that the cost was 17.5 cents per mile per ton. And that didn't make sense, so he went in and was able to raise money to put the Mascot and Western Railroad in. And he was able to put in, he was able to finance 41,000 ties and 790 feet of trestle. He bought 50 and 60 pound used Bessemer rail, and on April 18th, 1950, the arrival of the first and only locomotive they owned. It was a 460 Schenectady locomotive. And like I say, he had his offices in New York. He was, getting people to finance off of Wall Street and stuff, and he had a complete office. And in 1924, the New York State Attorney General obtained a court order to ban the sale of Central Copper stock in New York, which is his company. So that didn't bother him a bit. What he did was he loaded up all his books, all the records, file cabinets, and 28 secretaries, put them on a train to Wilcox. And it's really funny because these women were New York City. And he got off in Wilcox, and they were like, wow, what have I done? And what's really funny is they worked, they set up the offices at the Mascot offices right near north of Wilcox, where the mine was. And the cowboys were just going nuts, all the men, because here's 28 women, and they all had to take a bath, and they found out that they only had so many gallons a minute for the mine. And one Saturday night, all the women took baths, and they had to wait 3 days to replenish the water in the mine. So, very interesting story. And the thing is after they finally shut it down in 1932, so it went from 1915 to 1932, and the prices went up and down. And what was kind of cool is the women, it says that most of them went back to New York, some moved to California, and some of the women actually married men in Wilcox, and their families are still there today. So I think that's kind of cool. Yeah. So I think that concludes. So I went a little quicker than I thought.
Isn't that train car they got in Wilcox from the Mascot Railroad?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. It's right next.
Yeah, there is the Schenectady locomotive they bought, and there's the little depot that they built near the mine. But I think it was like 12 miles to Wilcox. Yeah, there. I think that's the end of it. Does anybody have any questions? Here, let me put my glasses on.
So I noticed some of the lines went down to Naco. Was that to connect with William Green's Cananea power operation?
Yes. And Santa Fe had a line on the Mexican side. There was the Cananea Rio Pacifico, I think was that one. And then there was one out of Douglas that went down. I'm not sure where that one went. And those tracks are still there, I think.
There's two depots, there's one in Wilcox and one in Patagonia. Are those, were those there? Are those removed there?
Patagonia. Yeah, the Patagonia one was built, I believe, by probably the El Paso Southwestern, because it changed over, back in 1903. The one in Wilcox, that's the original 1880 depot, and the city hall is in it right now. So, yeah, that's one of the few left. Yes. Yes.
Looking at the map where some of these lines are, does that mean there was a run out or run cable at the end of each of these zones?
There was a roundhouse in Douglas. There was one, actually two different ones in Benson, and I'm trying to think, where? No, there was none in Fairbanks. A lot of them did. The reason Benson had a roundhouse was because there's the altitude of Benson is 3580. And Mescal is about 4,000 feet, and Dragoon is about 5,000 feet. So they needed to be able to turn locomotives around and helpers to pull them up the hill. Yes.
These lines that go through, how often, and does it occur with these smaller stations? Do they have side tracks?
They all had side tracks pretty much. Yeah, like the one that went down to Sonoita and Patagonia, there were side tracks at Huachuca City so that they could sidetrack stuff in the military before they put the tracks in actually to Fort Huachuca. So,
About water?
about what?
Water.
Wars? Water. There was water towers all over the place. And I've got a picture of Fairbanks. I've got the building in one of those pictures here. You'll see a great big black tank, and they were all over the place. They had to get water every, 15 miles or something. There was one at Sybil, there was one at Ochoa, Dragoon, Benson, Mescal. That's why they had them, because they had to get water, let's say, every 15 miles or so. Yes.
You show some of these lines, spurs or whatever that are connected to part of the main line of the Southern Pacific. So you take picture things and then that's the pavement of the
Yes. They did do a lot of that, and one of the, in fact, it's another talk that I do. There was a big fight between Arizona Southeastern when they came up in 1888-89, and they came up to Fairbanks. And then they ran their trains across the New Mexico-Arizona line, and they raised their rates something outrageous. and it made Dodge mad. So Dodge says, we refuse to do that. We're going to build a track right next to yours, and they actually did. And it was 1894, and that's another reason that New Mexico, Arizona, the Santa Fe traded off to the Southern Pacific in 1898. And when they did that, like I say, they moved their roundhouse to Nogales and the depot building. And they used to put buildings, it's funny, they would put them on like telephone poles. They'd pull them off the foundation and take a bunch of mules and just drag it. And as it was riding off in, they'd take that other pole and put it around the front. The Women's Club in Benson came from a town called Total Wreck, which was about 15 miles west of Benson in a real rocky area. It's where Davidson Canyon is now if you're going to Tucson. So they were pretty good at moving stuff like that, and the buildings were probably pretty good because if you tried moving something today, it would probably fall apart. Yes.
Determine what kind of engine they would have, and they put you know, use wood. Well, where did they get the wood? Where did they get the water? Where did they get it?
Okay, when they started, remember I was showing you that old engine, that Reese and Leland with the wood burning stack? That was a wood burner. And what they would do is they would buy the wood wherever they could get it. They would load it up into the tinder, and they would put it in, you know, they'd load it in there for the boiler. Well, then they started using coal, and they would shovel it. And then all of a sudden we came up with these screw arrangements that would actually take the coal and run it into the engine that way. And in Benson, if you see some of the old pictures, you'll see a great big tank over by the water tank hill. And that was a 155,000 barrel oil tank that went in 1903. And so they started burning oil because it didn't create sparks. And that's why you see the stacks, like, see that one right there, you see the narrow stack. The spark arrestor stacks were wide. And oil is much easier to manipulate. You could fill it up in a tank, or wood, you might get in more in one than another. It didn't pack as well as even coal. Well, that's why there's no wood in Cochise County. Yeah, there was. The Chuka Mountains had a lot of wood, and they cut it down for the tombstone mines, and it hasn't grown back. So, but any other questions?
Do you know what that building that's in Elfrida? I've been told that was once part of the railroad up in Gleason, and if they moved that, it was either the building or the stock.
You know, it might be because, well, I wish I knew where all of them, a lot of them were torn down, some of them burned down, but the one in Curtis where Apache Powder is, that was moved in 1960, and it's actually used as a house now. And if you can drive over past Apache on Curtis Road, you'll see this funny looking house. That's because it was a depot at one time. Yes. Oh, that is the where the two trains met at Promontory Pass. Yes, and
You're talking about the stacks, so I went back to.
oh, okay, yeah. See, there's an oil burning stack, and there's a wood burning stack. Or it could be coal too. Probably coal. Yeah, because that's 1869. So the technology, it changes so fast. What's really amazing now, what we have, I love the old steam trains, that they're very efficient. They have what they call diesel electric, if you're familiar with that. They have a 16-cylinder, 9,000 cubic inch V16 diesel that runs a generator, and the generator runs the traction motors, And then on the other end of the engine, they've got a compressor that runs the brakes and stuff. So the technology, it's really a shame. These things are so cool, but they're just so inefficient compared to what they have today. Yes.
They had a strong Bisbee in
Yes.
I think it was electric.
I think it was too.
Where did they get the electricity from? Is that a coal plant? Is that?
I believe they started getting electricity about that time in Bisbee. Bisbee was a pretty forward, modern city. It was the largest town west of the Mississippi, other than San Francisco at one time, I know.
That is where APS started, was in Bisbee?
No, I'm not sure.
Where what?
APS. There's on public, yeah.
It's one of the reasons Bisbee and Douglas are served by APS and the rest of the county.
And Tombstone is APS.
Yeah,
The mining towns were low.
you know, I don't know how they do that, because Benson were SSBEC.
APS was first.
Yeah.
SSBC comes in when they do the rural electrification. So it gets everything that's not.
Yeah, it's so inefficient. That's why we all own it ourselves. And APS, I believe, is held by stock, because people can make money. If you can't make money when you've got 3 people living 20 miles out, you've got to run 20 miles of line.
So that coal, that line that ran coal must have been like first power plant.
Could have been, I know that, I haven't really checked into it, but I know that Benson had a couple of power plants at the turn of the century. One was behind one of the hotels, and one was up by the water company. And they were little, I guess they were gasoline-fed engines, and you think our power's bad now, and I would imagine it was pretty lucky back then.
The power, there was a power plant built by Phelps Dodge. They've since covered it up, took all the machinery out of there, and it was located south, right, Doug, south Bisbee.
Okay.
So, as Bob was saying, Bisbee was so advanced.
Right.
It was so cosmopolitan and metropolitan and,
It was the place.
but yeah, Phelps Dodge did have their, own power plant.
Disney actually had Buffalo Bill's Wild West. There's a flyer for it in their museum there, and it's because of the railroad. Buffalo Bill's Wild West traveled by railroad, and they actually were shown in this.
This is what I like about giving a talk to the history people. I don't know if somebody will.
Bob, are you familiar with the High Trestle that appeared in so many movies?
No.
It was about 3 miles west of Sonoyta, and it was over 100 feet high, wooden trestle.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check on that. See, that's the thing. I seem to be learning something new every day. I don't know it all. I'll admit that.
Well, I found it in the book you mentioned.
Well, yeah. If you guys are interested in railroad, get Myrick's, Railroads of Southern Arizona, Volume 1. And it is fantastic. And I wish I had a little more on Douglas, because I've done a lot on Douglas. And you guys had, I found a really neat article. If you give me your email address, I'll send it to you, because there was a saloon there. I think it was on 10th Avenue, right near where the depot was. And they had shootouts there, and they had some lady at the night got to a fight with one of her johns and threw a lamp at it and burned the place to the ground.
Oh.
That was like 1901. So, and Douglas had a lot of really cool stuff there. I remember when they changed the mercantile, it's now a county building. And I went in there when they were working on that. That was really a treat to see when they took all the old stuff that you could see what it looked like. So, yes.
back to this picture,
Yes.
from where it's going through that, what happened?
You know, that's what they're doing right here. It's the guy they're flipping for. That guy's right there. And I don't know who he was. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They may have had a roundhouse somewhere near there where they could back up to and turn it around. But if you notice the trains today, they go both directions.
That's because diesels can run backwards, and so all they have to do is switch the diesel, and that's why they have, it looks like, the front on both ends, because they just switch the engine, and it'll run backwards.
Okay.
And so they don't have to have that.
Yeah, okay, well. Yeah. That's another thing that I found in Tucson. If you, just before you get, when you turn where 19 goes south, if you look to your right, there's a roundhouse there. And it's used as a drywall place where they sell building supplies. And if you look on the Google Earth, you can see the shape of it. But the roundhouse, the turntable is gone. But it is still there. Yes.
So, I know around 92 from my research when Douglas stopped using their depot, everything went on. I know Douglas eventually went to Knoxville, right, or Paulsford, Knoxville, then San Pedro, all the way to St. David, right? When did that whole line, if you know, when was that removed, or where was it actually?
Probably in the late 80s or early 90s.
Okay.
Because that was between Paulsford and Douglas. And I don't know why they tear stuff up, because then, you know, years in, gosh, I wish we wouldn't have done that.
Yes.
Yeah, because it could have been used for people transportation, you know? And if you look across into AP, the tracks are still there.
It's still operational.
Yep.
And how about from Paulsford to connecting down to Napa, all that area to Fairbanks, was that taken before?
No, they pulled that out in 2008. And the reason they did, yes, it was 135-pound rail, and they sold it. It was in 39-foot sections. That's what your rail usually used to come in. Now they have this ribbon stuff that's a quarter-mile long, and they weld it. But that was put in the 40s because they needed the copper for World War II, so that's why they upgraded it. But the ties were in kind of bad shape, but the rail was fine. And what they did, they were running over that track, the San Pedro Southwestern. They had a tourist train that ran in the day, and then they had freight they would run to Apache at night. So they made money on both sides. But it was so expensive to run people over that track, the insurance, that's why they quit doing it.
And how far did it run? So you said from there, how far did it run until it was moved?
It ran all the way to Paul's Spur. And if you go on the other side of Paul's Spur, there's actually a tunnel that goes, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I've only seen it over maps, but that's so cool. I didn't know it still ran all the way to Paul's Spur.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, it was in different times when they started pulling stuff up. They added stuff, they removed it. That's why the map that I gave you, you'll see the green, that's El Paso Southwestern. It was moved here, then it was moved over here. And it's the same thing with Highway 80. When Highway 80 first went in, they straightened it out now, and you can see some of the bridges. They were Bisbee from 1929, you can see them in Benson. So back then, they followed the terrain of the ground, whereas now they have a laser they point it, and everything goes straight, the bulldoze it straight. So.
Thank you so much. I've been wanting to ask questions.
Sure, yeah. You should get a copy of that book, because it's got a lot of stuff on it. It's called The Railroads of Southern Arizona by David Meyer. And sometimes you get pricing, but once in a while you'll find them on eBay or some of those places for 20 or 40 bucks. Yes.
When did they, how many of these railroads were converted to the, asphalt trails? Like they are north of Benson or
None of them.
north of Fairfield? But I know that, the spur that ran from, Bisbee Junction, to the depot, it's called Highway 92, that they started that as a south, within 4 miles of my house.
Okay, I don't know anything about that, but I know that the trails people, when they abandoned the one that was down south of Benson from Curtis down to Charleston, they wanted to do a rails to trails thing with it, and the railroad said absolutely not. Right. Because once they get it, they can't do anything with it.
Because I know that north of Fairbanks, on the west bank, there's the old Spanish fort that got a trail like that.
Yeah, if it's some deal on M-Land, it's one thing. But one thing that's kind of funny, there were some people who bought property in J6 several years ago, and they wanted to put a house in a certain place, and it's where the old train track was. They were told that's railroad right away, and they can use it as a driveway, but you cannot build anything forever. Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think that the one that went down to Bisbee, they were talking about sending it back to the ranchers who owned it in different areas, and the railroad said, no, we want to keep it. Because we may want to use it in 100 years. That's the way to do things. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know anything about that, but there was lots of rails all over. If you get on Google Earth, you see all of it. Yeah, because they usually use that slag for ballast, and it's black, so you can see all kinds. And you can see the railroad when they were putting it in the 1880s. They just followed the contour every which way. And as they got better at it, they started to straighten them out more. And now what they do is they have a laser they point, and the bulldozer follows that laser and makes a straight line. So that's what they do with freeway. Yes?
Grade. What grade can I train on?
I think 4% is very steep. So I know that the one that comes down into Benson is fairly steep. But the one that went down from Mescal, the back road, was a lot shallower, which is why we put it in.
It was pretty level with.
Yeah, exactly. So, anything else?
Bob, thanks.
Okay.
And I've got one more thing for you to do. We need to get Karen up here and have the drawing.